Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Well, hello and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders with Marketing Huddle. Today we have with us Deb Calvert, who is the founder of People First Productivity Solutions. Welcome to the program, Deb.
Mike, thank you very much for having me on. You've had a string of really incredible guests lately, so this is quite an honor.
Well, thank you. And I feel like I've got such a really cool project with this show because I get so many people, even booking agents and PR reps that say, "Hey, can my guest come on the show?" And I find myself learning and picking up nuggets. And in one interview, I'll bring a nugget of knowledge that I learned from a different one, or use it in consulting with my clients. So it's just great to have like knowledge base and the mastermind, and so all of that. So yeah, thank you for recognizing that. But tell us a little bit about yourself and your background. I love the concept of productivity solutions. So any tips that we can go deep on here, I just love that. So get us started.
Sure. Well, I come from a Fortune 500 corporate background, and the company that I worked for was sold, and it was painful. Those last several months were just gut-wrenching to watch it all fall apart. But something I learned being at corporate is that there's a lot of attention around profit and around process and around everything but people. So when I left, I decided to go into business for myself. That's a whole other story. But I really wanted to work with businesses and help them put people first in order to drive the productivity to get the solutions that they wanted. So yeah, it's a long business name, People First Productivity Solutions, but it comes from a place of seeing what happens when you forget about how your people are what drives everything else that you want to get.
Well, I know you've heard of B2B and B2C, and I teach marketing, and so all of that is common, but just recently, and maybe I just haven't been running in certain circles, but I have been hearing twice this week guests talk about H to H. Do you know what that one is?
Human to human. I'm big on that. Yes. Yeah.
Well, what People First, reminds me of that concept of human to human, because in reality, we're all human, and we have to relate on a personal level. And I interviewed Jonathan Farrington with, just this week, from the UK. And anyway, we were talking about sales automation, and it's amazing to see what all we can do with artificial intelligence. But guess what? It really comes back down to people first and human to human. So where do you see that going in sales, with salespeople or sales systems maybe relying too much on systems and technology and AI, and they kind of forget that there's actually humans involved, and we have to go human to human?
I am absolutely on the same page with you. There are some interesting things happening, though. So I'm not giving up on AI entirely. Mm-hmm. There are some good things out there, like Crystal Knows. I like that particular piece of software, that app, because it is looking to put some of the human back into the automated. And what that particular app does is it analyzes the social media profiles and posts of a contact, and then it coaches you as you're writing an email to that person. It coaches you on some of the personality characteristics and some of the language that you might use to appeal to that type of an individual more. So that's a little closer to human, but also getting the shortcut and the tech to hack in and help you. But on the other hand, some of the technology is so far afield that it is just taking human right out of it. And we've all experienced it, B2C especially. You write you chat to a help desk, and you get some sort of canned response back, and it's completely irrelevant and actually a little offensive that you got that response. So there's work to be done on pulling these two pieces together and keeping them in balance. Yeah,
that's a huge piece. So definitely balance. I mean, we could probably write a book on the word balance, work-life balance and all of these things, and communication and sales style and all of that. But you recently did some research, or speak of some research, with B2B buyers. So 530 B2B buyers. Tell us a little bit about that study.
Yeah, it was fascinating. So I have had this theory for a while because I work in both the sales space and the leadership space. And my theory was, if a seller really wanted to differentiate, and I'm talking about that high standard of differentiation like you talk about in authority selling, but if a seller really wants to differentiate, behaviorally, what is it that they need to be doing differently that buyers will positively recognize and respond to? And because of my work in the leadership space, I developed this thought that maybe it's not using the stereotypical sales behaviors. Maybe, what if a seller were to adopt leadership behaviors instead? So that's what we researched, straight out of the Leadership Challenge, which is a body of work that goes back over 30 years and is evidence-based. Those are the 30 behaviors that leaders use that cause other people to more willingly choose to follow them. So we asked the 530 B2B buyers about the frequency of their current sellers, the ones they choose to do business with. How often do you see these behaviors? What would be the ideal frequency? And in all 30 cases, the ideal was even higher than the sellers they already choose to do business with. And then for the same 30, we asked, would this be more likely to cause you to take a meeting with a seller if you saw this behavior? All 30, again, yes, they'd be more likely to take a meeting. And we asked, would you be more likely to buy from a seller who exhibited this behavior? Again, all 30, like off the charts, consistent. And we asked them then to rank order those behaviors. So we know out of the 30, which are all good, which ones are most important to these 530 B2B buyers who come from a cross-section of various industries and complexity of sales and whatnot. So we now know behaviorally what it is that buyers are looking for that would differentiate, which I think is pretty cool.
So what's an example of one of those behaviors that you would be exhibiting that someone in the B2B world would respond to? So, what was piquing their interest?
So we grouped them. This might be a little easier way to answer it. We grouped the behaviors into 5 practices, just like they do in the Leadership Challenge. And that way we can sort of see the trends of the behaviors. One of the ones that ranked very close to the top is that the seller is engaging in a 2-way dialogue with me, the buyer, as they strive to understand my needs. Now, the significance of this is the 2-way dialogue, because we also took comments and got some real context around this. 2-way dialogue, very different from one-directional. One-directional means I bring you insights and deliver them. 2-way dialogue means we co-create these insights together. One way means I'm conducting the needs assessment. I ask you my survey questions and qualify you and devise a solution for you. 2-way means it's a dialogue and we're much more involved with each other. We're collaborating to think about that solution for you. So that's the kind of thing that we were able to extract from the survey.
And isn't it interesting that what one of the things was that, collaborative and 2-way rather than 1-way. As a salesperson, don't you feel like one of the biggest downfalls is we just want to be at that bull in the china closet and tell everything about our product and now all of a sudden that person's like, gracious, just slow down for half a second, when in reality, I don't know what research it is, but I know I've heard that there's been research done that you are perceived as more authoritative when you speak slower and when you ask questions. So again, that becomes, to your point, the 2-way, and people then engage with that better, and they feel like they're listened to. They feel like you then are a little bit more credible because you're not just going a mile a minute.
Absolutely. The first book that I wrote, Discover Questions, Get You Connected, also based on buyer research, is one of the places where you will have seen how questions are interpreted by buyers and how they respond. And authority is one of those aspects. The other big one is trust. We trust people who ask us questions and dignify us by really listening to our responses.
Yeah, I love Robert Cialdini's books, Influence, and then the new one, Persuasion, and it's that kind of thought process that if you can have the right, and there's 1.5 billion books on question-based selling, but what do you find helps a salesperson structure the right kind of questions for their product or service? Because you can get some generic checklist of here's some great sales questions to ask, and that's not going to apply to your situation. You want to be able to figure out sales questions that would lead that prospect to take that next step, which is, well, how do you do that? And, can you tell me how? And that comes from asking the right questions that pull them along, not push them in the process.
Right. So leading questions are one of the stereotypical sales behaviors that buyers don't like, in fact, won't tolerate because they've got the power. I am so opposed to scripted questions or a laundry list of questions. I understand sellers may need to kind of have some in their back pocket, but better than having somebody else's pre-written questions and then trying to force fit your buyer down a path, much better than that is to know the 8 purposes of asking questions, because most sellers only use 3 to 4 of those purposes. And when you can be more deliberate and intentional and in the moment to truly stay in that conversation and to be able to ask questions that are very purposeful to advance the sale, to understand the buyer, to build the trust, to be able to open up these collaborations, that's where questions become very powerful and bonding.
Yeah, and I agree. And I think a lot of people would agree in concept, but then when it comes down to the real world of, okay, grab a pen and paper and formulate your powerful questions for your sales, product or service, where's a good place for a salesperson to start structuring those questions?
Yeah, don't structure them around your product. That's going to force you into a leading situation that a buyer will resist. Instead, structure them around the buyer. Especially early in the sales process, the idea is to get acquainted. You've got to open up the sale before you can close the sale. That means you have to open up the relationship.
Yeah, I was literally thinking that word when you said that, relationship, yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's what questions do. And somehow we put on our sales hat and we forget that we're buyers too, and we're humans. So the human-to-human thing is that we use questions as a way to create a connection. Questions, when they convey genuine interest, curiosity, a desire to help, they work for you. Questions, when they are self-serving and they seem to be oversteering somebody where you want them to go, that's just an automatic shutdown. That's something that signals it's one-sided, and I don't want anything to do with that.
And, I think that buyers are a little smarter these days and can tell when a question is steering, and they feel it, and it's kind of like the cliche old used car salesperson, what's it going to take to get you in the vehicle? And believe it or not, that still is being used today. I've had it used on me, before, but I think that we need to feel like, kind of like even a sales script. You should have your sales presentation scripted, but don't read from a script and work from it. Have it to where you want to cover this and cover that and bullet point it out and work on it yourself, so that when you are asked something like your 30-second elevator speech, or you can pitch something, or in a meeting, that it just comes out. But boy, you don't want to feel scripted, and you don't want your prospects to hear questions feeling like you're just going down a list and filling in the blank.
Absolutely. That's boring. When we ask buyers about the 8 purposes of questions, so we ask them about specific questions, they have really positive, strong responses to some, and neutral or even negative responses to other kinds of questions. And you hit the nail on the head. The ones that feel like they're leading or manipulative or trite they actually put up a barrier between the buyer and the seller. Mm-hmm. So we just have to be more savvy. We have to be more responsive and tuned in to where our buyers are and what they want from us. They want us to have this two-way dialogue. They want to be treated with dignity and respect. They want to make sure that the seller is looking out for their interests, not just the seller's interests alone. And you can convey all of that with a smart, purposeful question.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. So here's a good question. How can salespeople today work as if they are an entrepreneur, so kind of like an intrapreneurial mindset in a corporate environment, because everyone that is in sales is not a business owner or an entrepreneur, but they can have an entrepreneurial spirit?
Yeah, that is a good question. I think it's simple. We make it overcomplicated. But I think what entrepreneurs do, the ones who are super successful, what they do is they see the need and fill the need. And that's exactly what sellers ought to be doing for their buyers. See the need, fill the need. If you don't automatically see the need, probe. Help to find the need. Put the spotlight on the need so that everyone can see it, and then fill the need.
Yeah, and you know, the problem is so many of us human and salespeople in environment as well, we're not paying enough attention while someone's talking. We're thinking of our next response or our next comeback, and then you lose something in that, right? I mean, how do you teach salespeople to be more present and engaged in the dialogue?
It's about getting out of your own head. And you're exactly right. Our brain, right, it's able to process and think so much faster than anyone, even me, can speak. And so we race ahead. And that, on top of the fact that we've always been taught, way back in middle school speech class, we've always been taught about the value of speaking, of being articulate, of being able to get others to understand your ideas. And all along through that, we've never been taught the value of listening and how if you truly want to be influential, you're going to hear what others are saying and respond to where they are and what they're asking from you. So those work against us.
They do, and I think that logically salespeople would agree with all of that. But I think that there's still a breakdown of they get in the moment and all of that goes out the window because they don't listen, and then they start spewing about the product or service and don't ask the right questions and wait. And so I think that you just got to somehow get to the point where you just slow down and listen and pace yourself. And, you know, at that point, I think that once you have a little bit of a victory in that and it worked out well, then the next time it's like, okay, that worked and I'm going to get better and better. And it's kind of like how Tony Robbins teaches Kanai, you know, constant and never-ending improvement.
Absolutely. And there's another benefit of questions. If you are having trouble slowing yourself down, you're excited, your adrenaline's pumping, you want to put the idea out there on the table, force yourself to ask one more question, a confirmation question or a hierarchy question to get the buyer to solidify their own value or to rank order the things that they value. And while they're doing that, answering that question, you are equipping yourself better to respond, but also dignifying that they might have a little more to add and saving yourself from prematurely putting something out there that's going to go down the wrong path and then you have to regroup.
You know, that's a really good point, and it's kind of like in the old days of sales training, you hear, you know, make one more call before you go home for the day, and that's the one that typically, you know, really is so awesome. And also, I've heard, I've experienced this before where, you know, you call into your credit card company and ask a question about whatever, and they answer it, and then you're like, okay, hey, great, thank you so much, and they say, is there anything else that I can help you with today? And I have found myself pausing and going, you know what? Yeah, I forgot. I wanted to ask you this, and we can use that same concept in sales, like what you just said, which is before you go for the kill or go for the close or move on, just pause and go, hey, is there anything else on your mind that I didn't answer or whatever that question may be? And I would venture to say that prospect might be like, yeah, you know what? And that could be a nice exercise for us to keep in mind.
Absolutely. One more question. Often pulls something out that if you missed it, you're leaving money on the table. Because you answered the first thing that suggested that it was a value to the buyer, but it turns out there was something bigger. And then we scratch our head afterwards and we wonder why we lost the sale to someone else. A lot of times it's just that we didn't have as much information as we needed, or we didn't have the buyer's buy-in as deeply as we needed. So questions.
Yeah, because we thought we did, but we didn't, or we hoped we did, and we gave up too soon. So, yeah, I love that. That's awesome. Well, Deb, I think we could go on talking for about 4.5 more hours, but let's wrap it up by giving our listeners what is the best place that they can go online to find more about you, your programs, books you've written, programs that you lead, or anything else they can learn from you about.
Sure. Well, okay, so the book we've been talking about around questions for small business owners and sales professionals, that's called Discover Questions, Get You Connected, and it's on Amazon. The new research, the movement known as Stop Selling and Start Leading, that talks about these leadership behaviors and how to use them in selling, that's not yet a completed book, but the research and some of the findings, and as we're continuing to build that, that's on a website page. You just do a Google search, Stop Selling and Start Leading. You'll eventually get to the page or to the articles or a lot of good stuff that's out there. Or come to my website, peoplefirstps.com, and look for it there. There's actually a seller side study that we're doing right now. I'd invite any of your listeners to come on in and participate in the research, because we're doing some giveaways, including a travel voucher for people who participate.
Neat. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. It was wonderful getting to know you, and we'll make sure we put the link to your website in the show notes.
Thank you so much, Mike. It was a pleasure to be here with you.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneursradio.com.